and thanks for joining us. My name is Lance Ichinotsubo of Captive Seas Aquariums and Elite Marinelife by Captive Seas. We're here today with my good friend Richard Back to talk about acclimating new arrivals and bathing them for the parasitic infestations that we've been so ingrained to expect. Basically, my experiences are wide and varied and have come to us well over 40 years now, as you can find in our book, which is entitled Marine Fish Health and Feeding Handbook. Today we received a shipment of fish, which we are in the process of acclimating now. We generally will utilize Quick Cure, and we've used this for many, many years now, going on 40 years in our acclimation as well as in our treatment of protozoan parasites. It is even effective against some metazoans such as trematodes. Once we get our fish in, we adjust everything accordingly. We test pH, we test specific gravity, not only in the incoming water but also in the water that they're going to be held in. We bathe our fish in a formalin and adjusted saltwater bath, the duration of which can be variable, and we will then place them into our quarantine tanks shortly thereafter. Yes, we believe quarantine is essential, but acclimating them and receiving them properly also plays an important role. One of the main reasons why we've been using Quick Cure for so many years religiously is because it's very effective against protozoans such as Cryptocaryon, Brooklynella, Uranema, and also against metazoan parasites such as trematodes, for example. We believe that it's a very important step in creating a healthier environment for our animals by removing existing parasites from those animals before they get into our quarantine system. Quick Cure, formalin and malachite green, has been used to prevent the spread of fungus as well, particularly on freshwater fish and their eggs. In saltwater fish keeping, however, there's a mixed emotion as to whether fungus really occurs in saltwater aquariums. I am of the belief that there are, although very rare, instances of fungus in saltwater aquariums. However, we do see from time to time what can be construed as or identified as fungal infections in marine fish, albeit they are very rare. There are internal funguses known as Ichthyophonus hofferi. Obviously, being internal, the formalin will not really affect it. However, I have seen what looks a lot like saprolegnia, the freshwater fungus, on saltwater fish. And generally speaking, Quick Cure can actually be effective against that form, albeit it's very rare and not frequently seen. Based on personal discussions that I've had with Dr. Edward Noga, a prominent fish doctor that I trust implicitly, he is of the impression that there are really no funguses in saltwater aquariums, and that fungus actually has been reclassified, if I'm not mistaken, as water molds. Not fungus, but water molds. And water molds basically will be similar to funguses in many respects. And I believe Quick Cure is effective in eradicating or arresting that problem as well. Typically, in utilizing malachite green and formalin in combination, known as Quick Cure, we will recommend 25 parts per million as an indefinite bath treatment. In other words, 2 drops per gallon net will yield 25 parts per million, and that is considered a safe dose for a long-term duration. However, in our baths, we raise that level anywhere from 50 to 250 parts per million, bearing in mind that 2 drops per net gallon is equivalent to 25 parts per million. The math and extrapolation is not very difficult. But once you start raising that level above 25 parts per million, time becomes the critical element. So every dose has a specific, I would say, maximum duration that you can allow fish to remain in solution. And then it depends on the species of fish, because some of them don't tolerate it as well as others. Now, if we were to assume that all of the fish were as healthy as can be when we come back from the wholesaler, there are certain species that are not as tolerant of the formalin bath as others. For example, there are some fairy wrasses and some dragonettes that do not tolerate it as well. Those fish we tend to use a lesser dose and for a shorter period of time. Now, unfortunately, it is true that we do lose some fish in the baths from time to time. These fish are probably in a weakened state to begin with, albeit it's really difficult to tell when you're selecting 20 specimens out of a tank full of maybe 100 of them. By the time you get them into the bath, though, it becomes very evident as to which fish are not going to tolerate the bath. In most cases, they would probably have died anyway, regardless of what conditions they were placed in after being purchased. Now, bear in mind that as formalin can rob oxygen from the water, you want to aerate it heavily while you're doing this treatment. And always observe your fish. If you see any stress at all in any of the specimens, some of them being less hardy than others or more tolerant than others, you should terminate their baths as required. That's a judgment call, unfortunately. It's hard to tell if a fish is dying, but if it's floating upside down, you can kind of tell. On a side note, when using Quick Cure, be very careful how you utilize it, because it is a very staining type of solution. It will stain everything it touches, and it's very difficult to get the stain out, particularly on white clothes and even your hands. Also, if you're a pregnant woman, be very careful not to handle formalin, because it is very dangerous and is harmful to your unborn fetuses. Now, when using formalin Quick Cure in your medication protocols, be advised that it can inhibit bacteria, particularly nitrifying bacteria, and at higher concentrations could potentially kill your bottom. That is something you want to avoid. Not to mention, as it removes oxygen from the water, bacteria will have a harder time gaining oxygen from solution. Unlike copper, which will actually plate out from solution, adhering to calcareous objects and the glass in the aquarium, etc., formalin does not leave the solution as such. However, we have noticed that the strength or efficacy of that treatment dosage will diminish over a shorter period of time. And so that's why we recommend that you do a water change and an additional dosage added to the quarantine tank on a daily basis for the duration of your treatment. In closing, I'd like to thank you all for coming, for viewing our video. And thank you to Richard Back for taking all this time and energy in producing it. We at Elite Marinelife and Captive Seas truly believe that it's incumbent upon us to do everything that we can to provide our animals with the best environment, the healthiest of conditions, and to prevent the spread of disease, preventing premature demise of our beloved animals. We'll see you next time. Thank you.